It started with a text I was never supposed to see. Sunday morning, 9:03 a.m. I was in the kitchen flipping pancakes, the chocolate chip kind my son Jake insists on every weekend. Sarah, our 12-year-old, sat at the counter acting too grown-up to eat them, but secretly hoping I'd make an extra. Claire, my wife of 14 years, was upstairs, supposedly folding laundry. It was the kind of quiet, predictable morning we used to dream about when we were broke and renting a one-bedroom apartment over a dry cleaner. Her phone was on the counter. Vibrated once. Lit up. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who snoops. At least, I wasn't. But over the last few months, Claire's phone had become something of a black box. Always locked. Always face down. She used to leave it lying around like a set of car keys. Now it was practically surgically attached to her hand. So yeah, when it buzzed that morning, I glanced. Just a glance. Tom B. Last night was worth the risk. 6 words. That's all it took to shift the ground under my feet. Not a novel. Not a confession. Just enough to tell me that the woman making chore charts and PDA meetings with me had a second life I wasn't invited to. Now, here's where most people expect the yelling. The dramatic confrontation. The kitchen table flipped upside down while the kids scream and someone storms out. But I didn't do any of that. I just stood there, holding a spatula in one hand, and stared at the message like it was written in a language I used to know but couldn't quite translate. Claire came downstairs about 10 minutes later. She was humming, of all things, and carrying a neatly folded stack of towels like it was just another day in suburbia. She kissed me on the cheek, said something about how good the pancakes smelled, and asked if we had any blueberries. Always with the blueberries. I smiled, handed her a plate, and in my mind, I started building a new kind of checklist. Not the usual stuff like fix the sink or mow the lawn. This one was different. Find out everything. Don't lose your temper. Protect the kids. End it on your terms. Because if Claire thought last night was worth the risk, I was going to make damn sure the fallout was worth remembering. I spent the rest of the day on autopilot, helping Jake with his science project, feigning interest in Sarah's soccer schedule, listening to Claire talk about a coworker who couldn't keep track of her own inbox. The irony wasn't lost on me. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat in the dark living room with a cup of coffee I didn't need and opened her laptop. I didn't have the password. I also didn't need it. Claire once used my birthday as her passcode for everything, a fact I used to find romantic. Turns out, she never changed it. And there it was. Her entire digital life. The email account was clean. Suspiciously clean. No old messages, no flagged conversations. She'd been careful, but not careful enough. I checked the trash folder. Bingo. Dozens of deleted messages between her and Tom B. Most were mundane. Meeting ran late. Loved seeing you. Same place next week. But one, from a week ago, stopped me cold. I still feel guilty sometimes. Not for Adam. He checked out a long time ago. But for the kids. They deserve better than this sneak around stuff. Claire thought I had checked out. That was the line that stuck. Not the affair itself. Not even the planning. But the fact that, in her eyes, I'd become so distant, so absent, that cheating wasn't a betrayal, it was a coping mechanism. Maybe there was some truth in it. We hadn't been connected. Not really. Between work, the kids, the house, and everything else, it was like we were running a small business together called Family Incorporated, with very little time left over for anything resembling love. Still, I wasn't the one sneaking off to motel rooms with someone named Tom. The next morning, I acted normal. Maybe too normal. Made coffee. Took the garbage out. Kissed her goodbye like I hadn't spent the night watching our marriage rot from the inside out. But while Claire was at work, I made some calls. First to a lawyer. Just a consultation, I told myself. No decisions yet. Just information. Then to Rob, my oldest friend, the kind of guy who doesn't ask dumb questions like, "Are you sure?" when you tell him your wife's cheating. He offered to follow them, take pictures. I said no. I wasn't interested in catching them in the act. I already had all the proof I needed. I was interested in control and staying one step ahead. That evening, Claire came home late. Said her meeting ran long. I said, no problem. I smiled. I even reheated her dinner. And all the while, she had no idea I was already 10 steps into the exit plan. That week, I started gathering what I needed. Copies of financial records. A second bank account. I even went through the house taking photos of everything we owned for inventory purposes. I wasn't going to be the guy who got blindsided. Not this time. One night, after the kids were asleep, I asked her if she was happy. Just out of the blue. She looked caught off guard, like she'd forgotten I was still paying attention. I think so, she said after a long pause. Why do you ask? I shrugged. Just wondering. Then she reached over, put her hand on mine, and said, You've always been so good to me, Adam. I stared at her fingers resting on mine and wondered how many times those same hands had tangled in someone else's sheets. It's a strange thing, knowing the truth and still playing your part. But that's what I did for a while. Long enough to make sure I had every detail accounted for. Long enough to make sure she couldn't spin the story into something that made her the victim and me the villain. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. And I was getting closer. Claire had no idea what was coming. Tom. That was the name I kept circling back to. Short, forgettable, almost laughably generic. The kind of name you give a goldfish or a neighbor you barely wave to. Not the name you expect to find attached to the man your wife is quietly dismantling your life for. But there it was. Tom B. He'd never shown up in stories, never been introduced at a work party, never once been mentioned in the blur of names Claire would rattle off when describing her day. And that was my first real clue. See, Claire didn't lie by telling false stories, she lied by leaving things out. That was her talent. She knew how to edit reality, like a highlight reel that conveniently skipped over the parts she didn't want you to see. So I started looking for what was missing. Her emails, texts, calendar events, all scrubbed. Too clean. Like a hotel room where no one ever sleeps but the bed's always made. But people leave footprints when they cheat. They just don't realize it. It was in the Uber receipts billed to our joint card, the ones that started popping up on Thursday nights instead of Friday. It was in the gas station snacks she no longer bought on her way home, because she wasn't coming from the office anymore. It was in the details. That's where the truth lives. I traced one of those rides to a hotel downtown, one of those business class types where you check in with a laptop and a lie. She stayed there for 4 hours on a Tuesday. Checked in at 5:11 p.m. Checked out just after 9. Long enough for dinner. Or something else. I didn't go to the hotel. I didn't want confrontation, not yet. I wasn't looking to create a scene in a lobby while some poor desk clerk stood frozen behind a monitor. No. I wanted to know who Tom was. And on Thursday, I found out. Claire's phone buzzed while she was in the shower. Just once. This time, I didn't just glance. I picked it up, tapped the notification, and read the whole thread. And there he was, Tom Bradley. Not Tom B. anymore. A full name. A face, even. One of those profile bubbles that looked like it was taken in a golf shirt at a charity fundraiser. Tan. Smiling. Harmless looking in that smug, unbothered way men have when they think they're bulletproof. He worked at her company, Liberty Insurance. Sales division. Of course. The guy probably made his living charming strangers into policies they didn't need. Guess it wasn't a stretch to charm someone else's wife. I didn't get angry. I just sat down. And then I called Rob. Again. Rob's the kind of friend you only appreciate once your life starts to unravel. He's not flashy, not poetic, but he understands damage, and more importantly, how to contain it. Still want my help? He asked when I told him what I'd found. I did. Rob's brother-in-law happened to work in Liberty's IT department. Within 24 hours, I had access to internal emails. Not the secure stuff, but enough to get the tone. Enough to see patterns. Tom and Claire emailed a lot. Some of it was work-related. Most of it wasn't. Nicknames. Inside jokes. That fake kind of intimacy people build when they want to feel special, even if it's built on top of lies. But then one message stopped me cold. We should have just told him. Honestly, I think Adam already knows. So that was it. She knew I knew. And still, she said nothing. That night, Claire curled up next to me like everything was fine. She asked if I wanted to watch a movie. She even rested her head on my shoulder like we hadn't spent the last month living in two completely different realities. I said sure. We watched a romantic comedy. I didn't hear a word of it. My mind was in another room, a future one, where I wasn't faking it anymore. Where I wasn't pretending to be the man she could lie to forever. It's a strange kind of grief, knowing your marriage is dying and still tucking your kids in like nothing's wrong. Jake asked if we could build his model rocket this weekend. Sarah wanted help picking out a dress for a school dance. I nodded to both, said of course. Because no matter what was happening with Claire, they were still mine. They deserved the version of me that was whole, not wrecked. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about saving the marriage anymore. It was about protecting what came next. The version of me after Claire. I started taking notes. Not just legal ones, but emotional ones. The little things I didn't want to forget. The way her voice changed when she was lying. The distance in her laugh. The pauses in our conversations that used to be filled with love but now echoed with silence. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning clarity. There's a difference. The next day, I scheduled a meeting with a divorce attorney. Quiet office. White walls. No drama. He asked me why I was there. I told him everything. The affair. The secrecy. The fact that my wife was still sleeping in my bed, lying with the same mouth she used to kiss our kids goodnight. He nodded like he'd heard it all before, because he probably had. But then he said something I didn't expect. "You're calm," he said. "Most guys come in here breathing fire." I shrugged. What's the point of setting fire to something that's already burned? He smiled. Fair enough. We went over paperwork, assets, custody arrangements, logistics. I didn't feel much. Just a strange kind of relief. Like the weight was already starting to lift. I walked out of that office into the afternoon sun and realized I wasn't stuck anymore. Claire didn't know it yet, but the countdown had already started. I gave her 14 days. 2 weeks. 14 days to be honest. Or I'd be gone. And not in a dramatic, suitcase in hand, slam the door kind of way. Quietly. Fully. Permanently. Because if she thought Tom Bradley was worth the risk, she was about to find out what it cost. The thing about lies is they age fast. At first, they look fresh, polished, sharp, believable. But the longer you let them sit, the more they crack. They start to smell. They turn on you. And the person who told them? They start to forget who they even were when they said it. By the end of the first week, Claire was unraveling. She didn't know I knew. At least, not officially. But she could feel the shift. I was quieter, more deliberate. I stopped asking where she was going or when she'd be back. I didn't reach for her hand at the dinner table. I stopped saying goodnight. She noticed. And like most people with something to hide, she mistook the silence for forgiveness. She thought I was withdrawing because I was tired. Maybe even defeated. She figured if she just played the role well enough, the affectionate wife, the attentive mom, she could ride it out until it blew over. But I wasn't pulling away. I was preparing. The Thursday before it all came to a head, I came home early. Claire was in the kitchen, still dressed in her office clothes, her hair tied up like she'd been fighting a headache. She was chopping vegetables for a stir-fry she never finished. I watched her from the doorway for a moment. She didn't see me. She was humming again, off-key, distracted, the way she used to when we were first married. I used to think that humming meant peace. Now I knew better. It was just noise people make when they don't want to hear their own thoughts. "Hey," I said casually. She jumped. "Oh, I didn't hear you come in." I smiled. Clearly. She offered a nervous chuckle and went back to chopping. I walked over, leaned against the counter. "You free Saturday night?" She paused, knife hovering over a red pepper. "Saturday? Yeah. Thought we could go out. Just the two of us." Her eyes flicked up, searching my face like it was a trick question. Sure. Yeah. That sounds nice." "Cool," I said, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Make a reservation somewhere you love. Let's do it right." She blinked, thrown off by the invitation. And I could see it, that flicker of guilt right beneath the surface, wrapped in confusion. Because to her, I was either an idiot who still hadn't caught on, or a man so deeply in denial I was throwing one last Hail Mary pass at a crumbling marriage. She didn't know I was giving her a chance. Not to fix it. To tell the truth. Saturday came, and she chose the restaurant, a quiet place across town where they serve overpriced pasta and pretend candlelight can fix anything. We got a table near the window. The waiter was polite. The wine was decent. She wore a soft black dress I hadn't seen in a while, not quite formal, but intentional. Like she was dressing for the version of me she hoped I'd be. Dinner was light. She made small talk. I played along. And then, just before dessert, I leaned forward. "I need to ask you something." She set her fork down slowly. "Okay." I looked her straight in the eye. Calm. Measured. "When were you going to tell me about Tom Bradley?" Her face didn't just fall. It collapsed. Color drained. Eyes blinked once, then twice. Her mouth opened, then shut again. Like her brain had pulled the fire alarm but didn't know which exit to use. What? I let the silence sit there. Let it breathe. Let her panic live in it. "You know who I mean," I said, voice still level. "The guy you've been seeing for the past few months. The one you text during dinner. The one you met at Liberty. Tom Bradley." She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Like if she didn't acknowledge it, it wouldn't be real. Finally, she spoke. "Adam. I don't. I mean." She stopped, closed her eyes. Exhaled. Then, how long have you known? I didn't answer right away. Because the question wasn't, do you know? Anymore. It was, how much do you know? I leaned back in my chair. Long enough. That's when her shoulders dropped. And the performance ended. She looked down, twisting her napkin in her lap, and said, I didn't mean for it to happen. That line. That tired, predictable, overused line. I let out a small laugh. Not cruel. Just tired. I'm sure you didn't. She looked up. I was lonely, Adam. I felt like you weren't there. For a long time. We were just going through the motions. And Tom, he made me feel seen. I nodded. That's fair. She blinked. Wait. What? I said that's fair. I repeated. You're right. I did pull back. Life got noisy. I miss things. Important things. And maybe if you'd told me that before sleeping with someone else, we'd be in a different conversation right now. She looked like she wanted to cry. But no tears came. Instead, she whispered, I never wanted to hurt you. I stared at her for a long moment. And then, calmly, I said, but you did. That was it. No yelling. No public scene. Just two people sitting across a table, acknowledging the quiet funeral of a life they once built together. She asked if I was going to leave. I said that depended on her answer to one more question. Was it just an affair? I asked. Or were you planning to leave me for him? She hesitated. Too long. I don't know, she said. I nodded again. That was the worst possible answer. And the truest one. We didn't finish dessert. I paid the bill. She didn't say a word in the car. When we got home, she went upstairs without a sound. I sat in the living room, staring at the shadows on the wall like they had something to say. That night, I started packing a bag. Not for her. For me. Because it wasn't about punishing her anymore. It was about choosing myself. It was the morning after the dinner, the one where Claire told me she didn't know if she wanted to leave me. I already knew my answer. I was leaving. Quietly, deliberately. No scene. No fight. Just the slow closing of a chapter. I had a duffel bag half-packed by the front door. The plan was to wait until Monday, take the kids to school, then vanish from her life with the same grace she hadn't shown me. But at 9:41 a.m., someone knocked on the door. Not casually. 3 sharp, confident knocks. Like whoever was behind them wasn't selling anything, they were here with purpose. I opened the door. She stood there, tall, composed, elegant in the way only someone with nothing left to lose can be. Auburn hair pulled back, coat folded over one arm. Her eyes locked on mine. You don't know me, she said. But I'm Tom Bradley's wife. I stepped aside. Come in. She walked through the doorway like she'd done it 100 times. Like she wasn't stepping into a stranger's house, but into something she'd rehearsed for weeks. We didn't shake hands. She didn't smile. I won't stay long, she said, sitting on the edge of the couch. But I thought you deserved to know everything. Not just the affair. From her bag, she pulled out a slim folder and placed it on the coffee table between us. Inside, time-stamped hotel receipts, text transcripts, email screenshots, GPS data. Not just of Claire's recent rendezvous, but going back almost a full year. A year. I stared at the dates. The nights I thought she was at her sister's. The conferences. The business trips that went long. She hadn't stumbled into an affair. She had a second life. Janet didn't look away. You okay? I nodded once. I guess that depends on what you say next. She took a breath. Claire isn't the first. I looked up. She's the third. Tom, he targets women at work. Married once. He likes the challenge. The secrecy. And they always think they're the exception. They never are. She reached into her coat and handed me something else, a printed transcript of a recorded call. I thought you should hear this, she said. I hit play. Tom's voice. Claire, you knew what this was. Don't blow up your life for me. That's not what this is. Claire's voice smaller, unsure, but I thought. Tom, no. This is fun. That's all it is. I paused the recording. Fun. That's all it is. I sat back. The betrayal wasn't even the worst part anymore. It was the humiliation. Claire had gambled everything on a man who saw her as disposable. She thought she was falling in love. He thought he was just passing time. Janet stood. I'm leaving him, she said. And I figured if you were ever going to leave her, you should do it knowing the full truth. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back. For what it's worth, you deserved better. So did I. Then she left. The door clicked shut. And the silence that followed felt heavier than anything I'd felt since this all started. Claire came home late that night. Said traffic was a nightmare. She was cheerful, oddly cheerful. I told her. I bet it was. She kissed me on the cheek and asked if I wanted to watch something. I told her, maybe tomorrow. She had no idea. Not yet. But tomorrow? Tomorrow, I'd make sure she found out exactly who Tom Bradley really was. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. That part had burned itself out weeks ago. I was just processing. Lying there on the couch, eyes wide open, watching headlights crawl across the ceiling like slow-moving regrets. The next morning, I waited for Claire to wake up. She came downstairs in sweats, still groggy, hair tied up, no makeup, the version of her I used to love most. The version I thought was real. She smiled. You're up early. I nodded. Didn't sleep much. She poured coffee, leaned against the counter. Everything okay? I took a breath. And then I told her. Everything. The folder. The photos. The transcript. The recording. Janet's visit. Tom's pattern. His words. This is fun. That's all it is. I didn't raise my voice. I just told her the truth she thought she was hiding. Claire didn't interrupt. She didn't deny it. She didn't even cry. She just stood there, staring at the floor like she was waiting for the rest of the world to collapse, too. When I was finished, I asked, did you really think he was going to leave his wife for you? Her voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't think about it like that. I shook my head. No, you didn't think at all. Then I turned to leave the room. But she stopped me. There's something I need to say, she said. And once I do, I know I don't get to take it back. I waited. She swallowed hard, then said the one thing I wasn't ready for. It wasn't just Tom. For a second, I didn't understand. Excuse me. Claire looked up, really looked at me for the first time in weeks. There was someone else. Before him. Not serious. It didn't last long. A couple months. He was a client. You were working nights and... I don't know. I was angry. I felt invisible. I couldn't move. My arms went numb. How long ago? 2 years, she said. 2 years. That's when Jake broke his arm. When Sarah had her appendix out. When I was spending nights at the factory trying to cover a layoff wave. When I was holding our whole life together by the seams. And she was somewhere else. With someone else. The affair with Tom wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. I sat down. Mostly because my knees weren't cooperating anymore. You've been lying to me for 2 years, I said quietly. She nodded. I don't even know who you are. Claire started to cry then. Not performative. Not manipulative. Just raw, hopeless crying. I was broken, she said. And I didn't know how to fix it, so I ran from it. From us. From you. And now I've ruined everything. I didn't answer. Because she was wrong. She hadn't ruined everything. She'd ruined us. But not me. And that's when I knew, with absolute clarity, that this was over. Not in the dramatic way people talk about over dinner with friends, but in the quiet, irreversible way that doesn't need paperwork to make it final. I stood up. She looked at me through tear-filled eyes. Are you leaving? She asked. No, I said. You are. Claire packed quietly. No drama. No shouting. No pleading. Just cardboard boxes and folded sweaters and the faint smell of lavender detergent that used to mean home. I watched from the kitchen, arms crossed, back pressed against the cold counter. She didn't ask for help. I didn't offer. There's a strange kind of silence that follows betrayal, not the tense kind, but the hollow kind. The kind that fills the room like smoke after a fire. You've survived, sure, but now you're breathing in the ashes. It took her 2 hours. She only took her clothes, some books, and a few framed photos, the kind people pretend to treasure but only keep because they look good on a shelf. At one point, she reached for a picture of the 4 of us, the beach trip from 3 summers ago. I saw her fingers hesitate. Then she left it on the table and zipped her suitcase shut. I'll come back for the rest, she said. I nodded. But we both knew she wouldn't. She stood in the doorway for a moment, keys in her hand, unsure of what to say. I think she wanted me to give her something, not forgiveness, but maybe softness. A sign that she wasn't leaving as a villain. I didn't give it to her. Goodbye, Adam, she said. I didn't say it back. Just listened to the door close and stood there, staring at the same place she'd just been. For the first time in 14 years, the house felt like mine. And I hated how empty that felt. Later that day, Rob came by. He brought a 6-pack and the kind of look that said, I'm not going to say sorry, but I'm here. We sat on the back porch, the one I built myself during a summer when we still held hands without thinking about it. The boards creaked under our chairs like they remembered better days. So it's done? He asked. I nodded. She gone? Yeah. Rob cracked a beer, handed me one. You okay? Not yet. I said. But I will be. We sat in silence for a while. It wasn't awkward, just quiet. Then he said something that caught me off guard. You know, she told people you were cold. I turned to him. He took a sip. Just saying. Her version was always about how distant you'd become, how you stopped noticing her. I didn't respond, because part of me knew he wasn't wrong. There were nights I came home so exhausted I forgot to ask how her day was. There were mornings I barely said goodbye. I had built this life, the job, the house, the insurance policies, the college fund, thinking it was enough. Turns out, it wasn't what she needed. Doesn't excuse what she did, but it explained the cracks. I guess the part that stings most isn't the affair. It's realizing how long you were both pretending. Rob left around sunset. I stayed out there, watching the light shift across the backyard like a slow apology. That night, I walked into Claire's now empty closet. It was cleaner than I expected. Just a few wire hangers, a bottle of perfume, and a pair of sandals she must have forgotten. I stood there for a long time, not really thinking. Just being. And that's when I found the envelope. Tucked behind the shelf, under a folded sweatshirt. No name. Just sealed. I opened it. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. And not addressed to me. The envelope was tucked behind an old sweatshirt Claire must have forgotten. No name on it. No return address. Just sealed, like a thought someone was afraid to finish. I sat on the edge of the bed with it in my hands for a full minute before opening it. The paper was folded in thirds. Her handwriting small, neat, too controlled. I'd seen it before, on birthday cards, school notes, grocery lists. But never like this. It wasn't meant for me. It was addressed to Tom. I know you said not to write, but I had to. I had to get this out of my head before it broke me in half. I never expected this, not at this age, not with kids, not after all these years. I didn't know I could feel this way again. And I don't know what it means. Sometimes I look at Adam and I wonder how we got here. We were good once. We were great. But now? Now I feel like I'm just fulfilling tasks, keeping schedules, smiling on cue. With you, it feels like me. The real me. And I hate that I need that from you. But I do. Please don't leave. Not yet. I'm not ready to go back to being invisible. I didn't reread it. I didn't need to. This wasn't a confession. It was a wound. One she never intended to show me. And still, here it was, open, handwritten, and left behind like a piece of herself she forgot to hide. I sat with it for a while. Let it settle. Let the weight of it find its place. It didn't make me angry. Oddly, it made me calm. Because it was all there. Everything I'd been trying to understand, explained in a few shaky lines. Claire hadn't just been unfaithful to me. She'd been unfaithful to herself. Tom wasn't the problem. He was a symptom. She had been disappearing long before she started seeing him. I just didn't notice, or maybe didn't want to. We were both going through the motions. And somewhere in between school pickups, mortgage payments, and date nights that felt more like calendar obligations than connection, we lost each other. No. She lost herself. And I was collateral damage. I slid the letter back into the envelope and placed it in the closet, right where I found it. Not out of spite. Not to pretend it didn't happen. But because I didn't need it anymore. Some truths don't belong on the kitchen table. That night, I sat out on the back porch again. Same chair. Same old what I once sanded myself, back when I thought I was building something permanent. The air was cooler now. Fall was starting to lean in. The kind of evening where everything feels a little heavier, a little slower, and more honest. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe without bracing for the next lie. I didn't feel strong, but I felt steady. And that was enough. The next morning, I made coffee for one. I stood at the sink, staring out at the yard, and realized it looked different now. Not better. Not worse. Just mine. I sat down at the table and opened a blank notebook. Not to write a letter, but a list. Change the locks. Separate the accounts. Tell the kids gently, honestly. Call mom. Explain everything. Don't harden. Feel it. Heal. Let go. I didn't cry. The tears came earlier, when no one was watching. Now there was just silence. And the low hum of something I hadn't felt in a while. Clarity. No revenge. No bitterness. Just the understanding that you can't carry someone else's emptiness forever without losing pieces of yourself. Claire didn't take everything when she left. She took what was already gone. And what she left behind. That's where I'll begin.